Welcome back to part 2 of our raster mask video in Photopea. They're called layer masks in Photoshop, but we already created the raster masks, and what we're going to do now is put in different backgrounds and make some image adjustments on them. Now let's bring in a background. This should be pretty easy, so we're almost done here. Most of it was just a mask, so I have a couple here. I don't know which ones are going to work. I'll just try this one. I'll just copy it, copy image. And I'll go back here and I'll go in the background, so when it pastes above the background and behind there. So I'll just do Command V or Control V, and there it is. And that looks pretty nice. Now I can click on this and put on my transform controls. They're all from the same camera roll, so it's the same size. So I could make it bigger or smaller. I could scale here and make the background a little bit bigger. Maybe you want to see the little house in the background. Maybe that makes it look nicer. Maybe that looks okay. Maybe you want to warm the background. Maybe you want to lighten the background. Back here on layer 1, I can go to, and I did hit enter after I rescaled that, and I could go to image, adjustments, levels. Now levels adjust the highlights, the shadows, and the midtones. I could even tweak the midtones a little bit just to brighten up the background. I don't want it more contrasty. I want them nice and contrasty because they're in the foreground. So just lightening the midtones. I don't want that real contrasty in the background, although if it helped, you could make it a little more contrasty because they're contrasty. So I guess darkening the darks a little doesn't look too bad. And that looks okay. And that looks good. We have a nice kind of background. If you didn't like that background, you want to try a different one, just go back here. I'll click on this one, copy it, copy image. I'll do it in front of this one. There it is. That's a nice background with the sunset. Make it a little bit bigger. Maybe bring the sun down a little. It's right between them. That's a nice shot too. And maybe they look too warm. Maybe this isn't as warm. So maybe you want to warm up the background and make it more look like this, or maybe you want to cool them a little bit. Whatever you want to do, you could cool them, but I don't want to change them right now. I think they look okay. I think I'm going to change the background, so I'm going to go to image adjustments, and you remember we use photo filter, and I'll make it a little warmer, and it did right away. It does orange by default, but I don't want it that much. I just want a little bit, and I'll just kind of warm it up just a little so it brings up some of the tones that are in the dogs, and that looks nice. Now I didn't do anything with the dogs. I can brighten them up a little too. Make sure you go on the layer, not on the mask. And one place I like to go first is image adjustments, shadows, highlights, to bring up some of the shadows in the dark dog. Now this is too much. That's kind of making it chalky. But if you move this down to maybe like around 20 or something, and then preview it, it looks okay. Now I like it contrasty because the sun's behind them, so you wouldn't see a lot of light on them anyway. So maybe I'll just make it a little bit, just a little bit, just to brighten them up a little bit, brings up a little detail in his face. That looks okay. And then next I like to go to image adjustments, levels, and then you can adjust the highlights. You could brighten them up just a little bit with the highlights. That'll kind of shift everything. And just a little. You always want to do things just in little increments. So I'll just brighten them up a little. They're the main feature here, so I'll brighten them up a little bit. And that looks pretty good. And that's a nice background. I could hide that one and say, well, do you like that one or that one? And I think that one looks better. And I'll try this last one to see how this looks. This has clouds in it, different time of day. The sun's up a little higher. I'll copy this image. I'll go here and I'll paste it on top of layer 2. So I'll go in layer 2 and I'll paste it. And there's that one. That looks pretty nice too. I might not want the sun in there. I might want to move it over. And has a lot of nice tones that picks up the tones that they have in their skin as well. So that looks pretty good too. So that's a nice image. I don't know if I'd change anything in that. I might make it a little more contrasty. I might go to image adjustments, levels. Now I'm on the background, this layer 3, to make it contrasty, darken the darks. You can see it's going to darken up some of that wheat and stuff like that. So that looks pretty good. If you had to do anything where, let's say you wanted to warm up the dog, you said, well, he looks there's a little bluish light there. You could just go here and take your lasso, like we did in the previous video, go around his head. Just select his head and make sure you go on the layer where the dog is, and make sure you're on the dog, not the mask, and go to Image Adjustments, Photo Filter, and warm up his head a little. Now, I don't want it that much, although that doesn't look bad, but maybe somewhere around 20 or 30 looks a little better. It takes away the blue and it looks more like the other dog. So maybe even a little more, maybe 35, something like that. That looks pretty good. And I could have included the ear as well, but I think that looks okay. You're not going to really see the difference. So that looks pretty good. So we have 3 nice images here, the sunset and the field with the house in the background. Now, one last thing I'll do here just to finish this off, I'll hit File Save. And this is just a real quick tip. And I did it on the other one. I did that little vignette border. And this is real easy to do. And one thing you want to do is make a new layer. So I'm going to make a layer above my dogs and the mask. So I'll go down here to hit this little new layer icon, and I'll just call it Vignette, Vignette. And all I'll do, I won't even do it real good, I'll just kind of do a quick version. I'll go in here to my lasso tools and I'll go to Rectangular Select, and sometimes you may see them on a separate tool, but it's the Rectangular Select. I'm just going to go in here a little bit. Now, you could bring the ruler out and make sure it's perfect and use guides, but I'm just going to do it by eye right now. I'm just going to make a border that just comes in a little bit. And it's not even perfect, but I just want to show you how to do this. So I'm just making a rectangular selection, and I'm on a new layer. There's nothing on that layer. And I'm going to select Inverse. Select Inverse. That selects everything opposite, so it's selecting everything outside of that area. So it's making a little selection there, and I'm just going to fill it with white. How do I fill it with white? I could just go to Edit, Fill, and I could use foreground color, which right now is black, or I can just choose white. And there's also a shortcut, Option Delete or Alt Delete, you can use as well. So I'm going to fill that selection with white. And I'm on a new layer. I'm not messing with anything else. And there it is. And you might say, oh, well, that just looks like a white border. But what I'll do is do Command D, which is Select, Deselect. I'll deselect that selection. And then I'm going to blur this border by going to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And right now it's at 7.2 pixels. It's a little bit of a blur. If you take it up, you get that nice soft vignette effect. Looks pretty cool. I'll hit OK. If you don't want it, you turn it off. There, you have a nice present you could get for somebody, for their dog. So here's your dogs in front of the sunset. If they don't like one, you could print all 3 out and say, well, there's one with the sunset, there's one with clouds, and there's one with house in the background. Maybe there's one without the vignette if you don't want the vignette. But all these cool things you could do, and we did it with a layer mask. And if you don't like your layer mask, you can always go back and change it. You can soften the edges, make the edges harder. You can reveal things with painting with white on there, anything you want to do. But layer masks are a real cool tool. It does take time to go around and clean them up and silhouette them really nicely. You want to make sure you take your time to do that, just like if you were cloning or doing anything else. You want to take your time and do it nicely. But I think that came out as a kind of a nice image here. You could even colorize your vignette if you want, but that's a nice image. And don't forget, you can export 3 of these. Let's export JPEG, and you could call it Dogs Sunset. Actually, I like to put it to 80 and hit save, and it'll download Dog Sunset. And then you might say, well, I'm going to do Dogs Clouds. And now you can go File, Export as JPEG, and just change the name because the Photoshop file or the PSD file is Dog Sunset. So I'll call it Dog Clouds, so you have a different file. There's Dog Clouds. And I'll download that one. And then there's the one with wheat and a house. You could call it Wheat House or whatever. File, export as JPEG, and I'll just put Wheat House. And I'll hit save. So now I just generated 3 JPEGs with the 3 different backgrounds on there using my layer mask. And if I ever want to take away the mask, I can delete the mask. You can always right click on here, disable it. You can apply it, which actually makes it permanent, or you could just delete it and start over. Didn't do a good job or you don't want it. You could always do that. So those are some options. And I think that's about it. We did a cool kind of exercise here. Hopefully you enjoyed doing that with Photopea. You could do the same thing with Photoshop, but you can do it free with Photopea, which I like. So thanks for watching.